And welcome to the Cambridge Zero Climate Change Festival. The festival is back this year, bringing together people from all backgrounds to share solutions and explore new research and learning to inspire global action on climate. And last November, the University of Cambridge launched its first International Climate Change Festival, dedicated to raising awareness of climate change and decarbonisation through engagement between academics and broader communities. And this year, we're going to build on that achievement by focusing on the important work our communities are doing in the run-up to COP26, the United Nations International Climate Change Conference, which is going to be happening in Glasgow in just a few weeks. COP26 is a pivotal moment in the fight against climate change, bringing together leaders from across the world in an effort to reach agreement on how to limit global warming. And this year's festival is going to focus on the work that many people are doing to raise ambition and catalyse action to help make COP26 a success. Now, it's striking that many of the key figures who've been at the forefront of promoting and supporting climate action at an international level are women. Patricia Espinosa, Christiana Figueres, and of course, Greta Thunberg, to name just a few. Many of the people leading solutions are also women. Mary Robinson highlighted a number of inspiring stories from community action to business entrepreneurship to political leadership in her book on climate justice. And she's promoted, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, the idea that climate change is a man-made solution that requires a man-made problem that requires a feminist solution. But she's also highlighted that climate change is a justice issue and that many of the injustices are associated with the fact that frequently women in society are the most impacted by climate change. So with that, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce today's opening panel, which is going to discuss the important topic of women and climate change. So let me first introduce you to each of our panelists who come from around the world, and I'm incredibly grateful to some of them having got up at the early hours of the morning. So let me first introduce you to Princess Esmeralda of Belgium. Princess Esmeralda is actively engaged in the protection of the environment as well as women's rights. She's president of the King Leopold III Fund for Nature Exploration and Conservation. She's also chair of the Friendship Belgium and ambassador of WWF UK, patron of the Princess Liliane Cardiology Foundation, and a member of the board of the Virunga Belgium Foundation. She's been over many years a global advocate for the rights of indigenous people and has participated in several campaigns to raise awareness of their cause. Our next panelist I'd like to introduce you to is Erika Artega Cruz. Erika is an Ecuadorean feminist physician. She coordinates the Environment and Health Circle of the People's Health Movement, a global network bringing together grassroots health activists, civil society organizations, and academic institutions from around the world, particularly from low and middle income countries. She's been an activist for the rights to health for 2 decades. At a regional level, she coordinates the environmental network of the Latin American Social Medicine Association. Erika was part of the Psychosocial Action and Research Collective researching psychosocial effects of extractive industries and effective communities in Ecuador. And she's a professor of the San Francisco de Quito University. And the final panelist that I'd like to introduce you to is Derek Cabe. Derek is coordinator and community organizer for the coal and nuclear free Bataan movement and the Kilusan Pambansang Demokrasya. I probably pronounced that completely incorrectly, apologies, in the Philippines. She's a staunch environmental and political activist and human rights defender. She's among community members leading the campaign to hold companies like San Miguel Corporation accountable for its coal plant violations in the Philippines, which are directly affecting residents in the province of Bataan. Derek has actively campaigned in protecting and defending communities against the damage caused by dirty and harmful sources of energy. Her more than 25 years experience at the front lines have galvanized her commitment in promoting environmental awareness and protection, as well as human rights and social justice. So we are incredibly grateful for you to joining us today in this opening session of our Climate Change Festival. And I was going to turn to Eric, you first, if that's okay, just to give your thoughts on this issue of climate change and gender, how the two come together.
Oh, thank you very much for having us here. I prepared a little slideshow of images of selected images of my country, Ecuador, which has three different climates from the coastal region, the highlands, and the Amazon region, and where the impacts of extractivism is. As I said, it's great to be here with you today, but also it's very timely because we had just commemorated this October 12th, 529 years of colonization of America, and our struggles still resonate with those of our ancestors. Protection of territories and land has been the history of the peoples of the Americas for more than 500 years. And this is not past history, it is continuously present in each community displaced by mining, needed for the transition even to a Green New Deal. Because of lithium, because of cobalt, they are also displaced by oil industry or even by the alternative energies boom, such as eolic energy. Forests in Sarayaku, territories in my country, forests in northern Esmeraldas province in Ecuador are destroyed to seek balsa wood that will power eolic energy, that is one of the carbon zero proposals. Can you please go through the slides as I speak? Next and next and next. Thank you very much, Antoinette. Indeed, we are still hearing the echoes of children buried in residential schools in Canada. The cry for help of those exploited and displaced by an unequal and unfair global system that has been in place more than 500 years. The people expelled from their territories that are now long migrant caravans or overloaded boats with disposable bodies sinking in the coasts of Europe. I co-coordinate the PHM Environment and Health Circle, and our vision of climate change is not independent from the extractivist model of production implemented globally. Thus, the solutions for climate change come when we face holistically the capitalist system, the patriarchal system, and the colonial system. Being a woman in this world is important, as Emily said right now. We are the ones who take care. We are the ones raising our voices and recognizing each other. But being a woman in power is not enough. In the presentation later, you will see, I posted a picture of Kamala Harris being a racialized woman in power that still is working towards the oppression of the most vulnerable, migrants, other racialized women, children from Guatemala. My voice today is not one of hope today. It's a voice of impotence, of dignified rage, as Zapatistas from Chiapas, Mexico said, and of anguish. I am afraid that the enormous inequity in the distribution, for instance, of COVID-19 vaccines still now shows us how even when we as a whole world need to be immunized altogether to stop the spread of disease, only the most privileged continents, the most privileged countries, and the most privileged social classes within those countries have access to life-saving devices. Those same privileged countries and those same privileged social classes have the protection with the vaccine, demonstrated that the tech industry is not, technology is not the main solution to our problems. Climate change is not different, I'm afraid. It will affect disproportionately the global south, having in the global south shoulders also all the weight of the extraction of minerals needed even for the transition away from oil. The minerals that would be used also for a climate zero tech alternative. This means that technology alone wouldn't do it. We need a total rebuilding of our civilization and tearing those whole power structures in the colonial structure, the patriarchal structure, and the capitalist structure. In a depatriarchalization, a concept portrayed by an Andean feminist called Maria Galindo. Indigenous peoples are the protectors of the land, and Noam Chomsky already described them in 2015 as the only alternative to stop global warming because they have other ways of living. Protecting their territories and their ways of living is a goal, not for a pure act of solidarity or because we have empathy, but as a means of survival for me, for my two children, and the grandchildren I hope to have one day. Being a woman who speaks English is a privilege in my country. I acknowledge the privilege of being here with you today and hope for a better future where the voices of the Global South matter, where the lives of those in ships or in immigrant caravans are not disposable, where our lives as women are not threatened, where children, such as those in Tsum Tsum, Shuar people, I have some of them, of the children in the pictures, can have a good night's sleep in their homes without the fear of the invasion of heavy machinery drilling to extract copper. I wanted to end my 3 minutes with can we move to the last slide, please? Thank you. This is the words, the last one. Those are women on the front lines, always defending. And the last one portrays the hope that we have also. From Ecuador, we have a proposal that's called Good Living, which has nothing to do with a state of welfare, and it's another relationship with nature. And these words reflect it, and it says, Father, fire, we are no more, we are no less, because we ourselves are fire. Mother, water, we are no more and we are no less, because we ourselves are water. Father wind, we are no more, we are no less, because we ourselves are wind. And Pachamama, or Mother Earth, we are no more, we are no less, because we ourselves are earth. And these are the words said by traditional birth attendants from Cotacachi in Ecuador. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Erika, for those really important comments of yours, and I think not least that this we're talking in the context of gender inequality here, but I think you've touched on the much broader inequalities and the really important issue that voices from the global South really do need to be heard. Could I now turn to Derek, and I wonder whether you would like to share your opening thoughts with us.
Hello. It's magandang hapon. It's good afternoon here in the Philippines, and yeah, and thank you for really inviting me to be here, to be one with this amazing panel, and to be listened by people who are very much into climate justice campaign at the moment. I think for me, all of us are familiar with the phrase "beggars can't be choosers." This reminds me of how survivors of calamities, natural or man-made, are being reduced in times of disaster. The survivors become more mere recipients of the relief goods from donors and benefactors. While I have no issues in giving, however, it is the giver's choice that matter and not the recipient's need or context. Apparently, this is what disasters can do to people. These are what has been the result of disasters to us. We are reduced to being, beggars, no? And it can transform people from being self-reliant to dependent, no? And from being resilient to being desperate, and from being poor to miserable, and thus stripping off their right to choose, and in the process our own dignity. So this was how typhoons and the climate impacts of climate change has done to us, especially in the Philippines. It has made me realize that we are overwhelmed. No? We are overwhelmed by the power of the climate change, and we cannot do anything about it. And I think today is very important because we are here to discuss, and we are here to not only discuss, but also I share our experiences, and maybe somehow we can share our common goals of addressing this climate change in the perspective of women, and maybe we can I can learn from all of you here, and maybe by learning from your experience and learning from what you are doing, what you have been doing there as a climate as part of the climate movement, especially now that the Glasgow is upcoming. We can learn to protect our sectors as women, and we can learn to protect our planet in general, because there is only one planet, and we owe it to our children and the future to preserve it for them to have a good future. And maybe that's my opening statement. And maybe if I can add, my organization is a grassroots-based organization, and we have been fighting against fossil fuel business like coal-fired power plants and fossil gas, because it's been causing so much miseries to the communities. And that's all. Maybe we can share again later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Derek. And I think that the points that you're making about the importance of us sharing our ideas internationally, everyone around the world, around the globe is, trying to create, as you describe, a better future for our children. And if we can share our ideas and our thoughts as to how to do that, and we can collaborate together, then that's surely going to be the most effective way to achieve that. Can I now turn to Princess Esmeralda? So Esmeralda, delighted to have you with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm so happy to be here with such inspiring women and fighters, because as we said at the beginning, this is really also a question of climate justice. Climate justice, because obviously all over the world, even in our country, it's always the most vulnerable and the poorest who are affected. And women make the vast majority of the poorest in the world, about 70%. So they are exposed of extreme weather events, also because of the role that society has imposed on them. They are the one responsible for collecting food and water. Let's just remember that women in Africa spend 40 billion hours per year collecting water, which is also very dangerous, because on their path to collect the water, they are very often attacked and sexually harassed. And I was struck to hear Erika talking about, yes, the root cause, which is colonialism. We know that. Today, there's still colonialism in all the global south, because it's the multinational that continue the same policy of extracting and imposing on local population for the benefit of people far away in our country, in the West. And women suffer mostly violence. All around those extracting companies, studies have been made that the violence against women increase. It's also the case in Africa, where we have all those mining companies, and we know that the militia sometimes who own the mining companies attack women. So it's really linked. And I have heard so many indigenous women talking about the impact on Mother Earth and the impact on women. And they really see the parallel of violence against the two. But I don't want to talk only about women as victims. They are also agents of change. They are incredible, like those two women that we have here, on the ground, having the solution, having a vision which is different from the male vision. Doesn't mean that it has to replace it, but it has to be at equal position. And unfortunately, when we go to those big conferences like the coming Glasgow conference or any other conferences, women are not equally represented. And this has to change. We need the voices of the global south. We need the voices of indigenous people. We need the voice of women. in all their diversity. Because, as somebody said, I think it was Einstein who said, we cannot expect the people who created the problem to solve it. We need a new vision, and we definitely need women. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I completely agree that it's so important to highlight the three aspects that you have, that not only are climate change in so many ways exacerbates existing inequalities and existing challenges, and not least in terms of the challenges faced by women around the world and the injustices that they already face. But also there are so many inspiring stories already of women taking amazing leadership positions and driving forward the solutions. But the third point that you made that is so critical as well is that their voices need to be heard, and need to be heard on an international stage. So to everyone listening, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion amongst the panel now, but while we're doing so, if you can think of any questions that you would like to pose to our wonderful panelists, then please use the Q&A function, and we'll be gathering those questions over the next half an hour or so, and then we'll put them to the panelists in the second half of this session. So please start thinking what questions you would like to address. But let me first just turn to each of the panelists. And I mean, we've obviously heard from each of you about some of the challenges faced by women in but also the important role that women can play. And I wonder whether perhaps each of you would like to expand on the latter, whether there are any examples that you have come across of really amazing women who are taking an important role in inspiring or actually taking part in climate action, and where you see women having the greatest role in the future if they were empowered to do so. So I don't know whether Erika, you might want to talk first about that. Some inspiring stories to start us off in a hopeful mode on this panel.
Yeah. Well, in Ecuador, as I tried to portray in the slides, most of the marches denouncing the March for Water in 2012, the march from Amazonian women defending their nature, are kind of led by women, as you said, portraying the voice of nature. But I also want to stress this out, because I don't think the solution also is only to give voice to women and then climate change will change. Although I acknowledge that we are lacking to have our voices, there are women that are in position of power that are functional to the patriarchal system, as I said. So when you see the fight or the struggle, for instance, of the indigenous movement here, which is really strong in Ecuador, and it's kind of the vertebral axis of all these struggles, anti-capitalist. You can hear a historical leader, which is Blanca Chancoso. Blanca Chancoso is the historical indigenous leader of the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities and Peoples of Ecuador. And she said in the Women March that promoted a dialogue with the government, stopping the number of deaths, but especially during the uprising against the International Monetary Fund policies in Ecuador. She said, I'm gonna grossly translate, never on our knees, the spirit of our compañeros and compañeras, so men and women, the defenders of life who were murdered, along with the knowledge of our taitas, shamans, and mamas, women of power, will be with us during this resistance. So it's really important to tackle the three, as I said, power structures. It is this woman, this Blanca Chancosa, this leader that portrays this very potent, but never fighting only for the voices of women, but against the patriarchal system, which is represented by the International Monetary Fund policies in Ecuador, for instance. They are doing all these cuts in social sectors, but that are also expecting to give us money, and in exchange, this is a loan, right? And when you pay the loan will be paid with money from mining, because 15% of our countries are given to mining companies. So I hope this helps and answers the question.
I think, thank you very much. And I think that, yeah, I mean, part of what you're setting the scene on is that this is a much wider set of issues that all interconnect here. And unless we solve some of these wider issues, then we're not going to be able to approach climate change either. And that's why it is so much of a broader injustice issue that needs to be addressed. Derek, can I turn to you for your maybe again, is there any inspiring stories that you'd like to share with us around the role of women, or where you think that women could be playing an important part? I think you're on mute actually, Derek, if you want to just unmute yourself.
If I may share, I just want to introduce to you my colleagues, my women colleagues in the community. But it's a combination of a sad story but inspiring story also. I'd like to share this screen so that you can see. So can you see? Can you see my screen now? So these are my colleagues. If, as you can see, I'd like to share this to you because this story is a success story. This is a community where I live, and where a huge coal-fired power plant was constructed and now being operational. At first, they were trying to demolish our community, but since we resisted, and it is the women, as you can see in the pictures, they are all women, and they are all very courageous to put a barricade against a company or against a group of police officers to make them stop from demolishing people's houses, from excavating vegetable farms and trees, that the community has grown and has been benefiting from over the years. And these are my colleagues from then on until now. But the sad story there is this one. This is Ate Gloria Capitan. She was killed in 2016 because of our activism. She was killed because she resisted. She led her community in resisting the operation of a coal open stockpile in the midst of their communities, because we organized a resistance because the coal stockpile has been causing so much health problems to her grandchildren and also to the other members of the community. And she was killed, the first casualty of during the Duterte administration. It was in 2016, first day in office as President Duterte. And despite the sad story, still we were able, this community in Bataan, we were able to hold our ground. We were able to stand on our ground, and until now we are still there. We were never we never accepted the package of the huge company that has implemented their business without even public consultation, without due diligence. And we have been resisting these huge companies since then until now. And I think it is a story that I would really like to share, because we're still here and we're still fighting, and we're still part of the broader climate movement that's been resisting this fossil fuel industries operating in the communities. You see, the women of our group are the ones who are leading the local fights, and I think the local fights, we have to recognize the importance and the role that the local fights are doing, because it is in the local fights where the national struggles and the national programs and policies are being unmasked. But unfortunately, it is also the role of the local fights and the role of the community-based organizations like us, women organizations like us. Our role are sometimes the least acknowledged, and it is very important that women should step up and make their voices matter, because it is the women who are very much engaged in the community. They work, they farm, they fish, they do everything, and because of that experience, they always have this capacity to adapt, to the challenging situations, and capacity to identify practical solutions also. That's why their role is very important. Just like what we have in our community of women, the frontline defenders in our community, our majority are women. So until now, we're still in this kind of activism, and we're still fighting for our community to be free from the fossil fuel industry that has been damaging our environment and damaging our livelihood and damaging our planet as a whole. So I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Derek. I think, I mean, the points that you're making around the importance of local action, at the end of the day, the solution to climate change is going to be driven by local action in communities around the world, collectively putting us on a path to a different future. Esmeralda, if I could turn to you, I mean, I'm going to ask you the same question about whether you have any inspiring stories, but maybe at the same time, you'd like to also reflect on, I was very struck by Erika in her opening comments, speaking about distinguished rage and anguish, and these inspiring stories that Derek has been providing about fighters really fighting for their own communities. And I wonder whether you could also reflect on, for us in the privileged situation that we find ourselves, how can we be helping support those people who are fighting on the ground for their communities, their future, and their children's future in those communities?
Yes, and I agree that obviously it's much more than to be represented in those big conferences. We need a system change. We know that. I also want to say that all those big organizations are very much in the hands of men and white men still. We see a bit of change, but each time they put a woman or somebody from the global south, it's one person, and it's very difficult to change the whole structure if you are one among all the others. So we have to push for more and more diversity and to change the system, the patriarchy, the colonialism, all that, which is really a poison. We see it, it continues to fuel inequality, and climate change is absolutely increasing all those problems. So I wanted to share a story of hope, which happens in Congo, which is a country which is affected very much by biodiversity degradation, as well as women violence, especially in South Kivu, where the levels of violence against women are terrible. And there is one woman there, Nema, who really started her life in the most atrocious way, because she got polio. And in her community in the mountains, when a girl is handicapped, she's practically condemned, because she's not going to marry, and because this is still in this patriarchal society the most important thing. Well, they don't want to send her to school, nothing. So she was lucky to have a mother who believed in her and who said, education will save my daughter. So she carried her on her back every day to school, which was 5-6 kilometers away. And to make a long story short, Nema saw what was the injustice against women. She also witnessed what climate change was doing in her community, because people were burning trees to have charcoal, and there were more and more extreme weather events. So she decided to teach women in her community. Now that she went to university, she graduated and all that. She taught women about their rights and that they have to fight for themselves, but also that they had to plant trees, because that would help stop deforestation and also bring security for women who were so many times harassed on their way to collect charcoal. So she did all that, and she made an incredible community movement. And now all those women are trying to change the paradigm, really, and to say enough is enough with patriarchy. We have to take our place in the community. We have to fight. And this is an incredible story of hope. And there are thousands like that in the community, in the grassroots movements.
Thank you for that. Can I just remind everyone that if they want to put some questions, we're going to turn shortly to Q&A from the audience. So if you want to ask any questions to our panelists, then please use the Q&A function to submit them. I thought perhaps we could just explore this issue that's come up, I think, from each of you, about the challenge of the patriarchal system and how actually we really need systemic change in terms of that if we're really to move forward. And whether you have any thoughts, I mean, obviously that's a huge challenge. It's been so embedded and ingrained in our global societies for so long. You know, what are some of the steps that we could and should be taking to try to break down that patriarchal system, whether you have any thoughts on that? So perhaps I'll go around in the same order as before. So Erika, whether you've got any thoughts on breaking down the patriarchal system?
I think we need to make accountable ourselves for the people we elected for presidents. For instance, Trump being elected was the whole world under a patriarchal structure. That's one big one. Also, the participation of women in power, which is, I think we need that, but that's not enough. And what I see every time, heads of the International Monetary Fund are now women, and the vice president of the US is now women, that's rejecting migrants, racialized women herself. So we need to tackle the violent structure of war. I'm sorry, I'm not as hopeful as the other panelists, because I thought, even though I think that Esmeralda's story is really nice, that women are planting the trees, I also know that the army of the United States is now in Brazil, invited by Bolsonaro. And people in Brazil, not only in the Amazon forest, are fearing a military intervention to control the Amazon region for water and for geopolitical issues. So the change, yes, needs to be done in the communities, that women should have more voices and participation. But this change of social structure of the free trade agreements that we are signing Ecuador with the European Union, for instance, they are very patriarchal and still extractive. So how do we change that? We need to change the economic system also. And that's a huge step that goes beyond planting trees and goes beyond women marches or what women can do in the small part. I hope that we would change that with the at the initial stages of the pandemic, but we didn't. It's worse. So what can we do? We can still fight. We can still resist. And as Blanca Chancosa said, an indigenous, we have been fighting 500 years. We are prepared to struggle till death for survival.
Derek, can I turn to you? I mean, what do you think is, you know, how do we tackle this?
Yeah, I think as I have mentioned earlier, that women are engaged in many aspects of everyday life, and just like the men, they also do work, they also provide livelihood, they also provide food, they also nurture, especially they nurture. They fetch water if the water runs out. overall they contribute in everyday building, no, in everyday community building. But I don't think despite of that experience and the acquired knowledge from that experience, I don't think women are sometimes, like in our experience, we are always invited. It's good that women are being invited, no, to participate. They have access of participation, but participation is one thing. To be listened at is another thing. To be considered is another thing. The fact is, in most cases, we are just our attendance is just warranted. They just need us to be there because it's the women. But seriously, are you considering our voices? Does our voices count as women? So I think that's the problem, and I think the women must first claim, because of that situation, the women must first claim their place in the struggle for climate justice. They have to assert their rights. I say this because, since, as you have said, inequality and discrimination persist, no? Persist due to patriarchal system. The system we have now, the societal system that we have now, perpetuates discrimination and inequality, and the women are still being disfavored economically, politically, and culturally. And this situation sometimes makes it even more difficult for women to adapt to the impacts of climate change, like in our cases. I think it's in what I observed in my years of organizing the women. They have to step up. They should, like for me, our role is not just giving birth. We have to also secure the future, the good future of our children. It's not just about reproducing our offspring, but also it is about providing them, securing them the best future that we could muster. And we cannot do that if we do not speak up. We cannot do that if we just be contented on participating in conferences or listening to the people on the men on what they have to say, but also to really claim our voice and to make our voices count, to make our voice count. And it's a struggle. And in order to do that, we also have to be involved in changing the system, in the struggle to change this kind of system. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. I mean, Esmeralda, you've been involved in this, advocating for these justice issues for a long time. Where do this is not a new fight, but where do you see there being hope for the future in terms of trying to change the patriarchal system?
It's a very hard fight. Even in our society, we see how much racism, how much sexism there is. So it's all over the world, and it's a fight of every day. It's a fight to change the system. We can repeat that, and it's so true. We talk about the local communities, the global South. Of course, there's a lot and probably much more injustice still than in our society. Women don't have rights to their land, or very, very little. I think it's 15%. So we have to change that. They have little access to information, to technical education, all that. All that has to change. But in essence, it's really the system, the way it is all around men and all around rich countries and rich people. This system is not working. It's only working for a very, very limited percentage in the world. So how do we start changing that? Well, we have to do a lot of advocacy. Erika talked about Kamala Harris. I think a recent survey said that she's the most hated vice president in the US history. It must have something to do with the fact that she's a woman and a woman of color. And of course, it's not because we have one female vice president, that everything is going to be all right. She will go by the system. Otherwise, she would be completely rejected. So what do we need? We need more women, more and more in every level, in the justice system, in the political system, in everywhere. And it's only like that that we will impose a different vision, and it will not be corrupted by the existing system.
Right, we're now going to turn to some of the many questions that have come in from the audience, and I'm not sure whether we'll have time to get through all of them, but please keep submitting them and I'll do my best to make sure that we get through as many as possible. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to open it to, and whoever wants to come in, please respond. So the first question comes from Garth, and Garth asks, do you think the historical male dominance of engineering and technologies has created the extractive consequences we now face? So I guess that, you know, the original comment that I had from Mary Robinson about climate change is a man-made problem that requires a feminist solution. You know, has part of this, we've been talking about the patriarchal system, but is it even more ingrained than that, even that actually the structure of the world that we've been created has been an awful lot generated by the male dominance that we've seen to date. Anyone got any thoughts or comments on that? Yes, Erika.
There's a great book by Abdullah Öcalan, who is the man fighting the resistance of the Kurdistan resistance against Turkey. Turkey has another very patriarchal system. And Abdullah Öcalan, although he's a man, he has this historic perspective on how does patriarchy started. And patriarchy started when the agriculture did not was predominant, the care, but the hunting and the violence. So in a sense, yes, but I want to strengthen the part of extractivism started for us in America as a colonial thing, led by Isabella Católica. Isabella Católica was a woman, a queen, a woman queen. So it's hard for us to tie the three ones, and it's a fight to dismantle the patriarchy, the colonial, and the capitalist outside, but it's also a fight in ourselves. I want to acknowledge that in our Latin American countries, that racism and colonial is also in our bone structure. So authors talked about Silvia Rivera Cusicangi, who's a Bolivian intellectual, very famous. She talks about external colonialism, which is the one that free trade agreements, extractivism, companies, but also internal colonialism, which is the elites of our own countries that are exploiting the indigenous, and we have by the tone of the color, different treatment of the tone of the color of our skin. And that being said, I want to say that yes, I agree with Esmeralda. We need more women in power, but also this different type of doing politics or different type of building that Öcalan books portray, which is a collective voice, you know? And taking that into politics, where you do not shine by yourself, but you distribute the power among the other voices, as Derek said, all the voices of the organizations, without being one, the leader, or one. We said caudillo here, which is this populist leader that has the one voice and the whole power. And that's what happened with us in the progressive governments. We have caudillos, with Chavez, with Correa, with a lot of male-dominated. So the challenge is to change, to have more women participation, but in another way of making politics, which is more collective, more caring, more. Raquel Gutierrez from Mexico says, politica en femenino, feminine politics, which is not a very subtle something, but it's more a collective of a voice.
I think that point that you're making about it's about a different way of doing politics that is more collective and more collaborative, that recognizes that these very real issues about colonial and racial injustices that exist, but that one way of navigating through those is not just about promoting individual voices, but actually promoting conversations that engages much more widely with all those who are impacted by these critical global issues. So can I turn to the next question, which comes from Maria? Again, I think examples of success are so powerful. And Maria asks whether there are any examples that any of you can give of where there have been enacted examples of solutions to some of the social inequalities that are brought about by climate change within your own countries or communities. So again, looking for sort of the hopeful stories of where there's actually been progress made in the face of some of these inequalities. Derek, I don't know whether you want to, yeah.
Yeah, I guess, success stories are really inspirational, for us. Like if we have this little victories that we are able to, to achieve because of our as a result of our assertion, assertion of our rights and assertion of our in defense of our rights. It's really sometimes it's really, it keeps us going, and it keeps us it keeps our feet on the ground also. But if I may share, in the Philippines, the government right now has declared a moratorium on coal. Like they are not going to approve new applications of coal-fired power plants as the energy source here in the Philippines. And considering that almost 42% of our energy source comes from the coal. The coal provides the energy in the Philippines, and suddenly last year, the government, the Department of Energy, has declared that they're going to give a moratorium on coal applications, and they are now going to transition to different sources of energy. So I think that is an example of a success story, because the energy department will not declare a moratorium on coal should we just, kept kept quiet, because of the persistent persistent resistance from the communities, coming from the communities. And we had even, in fact, in the last 2 years, we had even made a huge company like San Miguel Corporation. For 1 week, the stocks, the shares of this company has gone down. That's why the PR people of these companies have been working 24 hours to, to revert the to revert and to work on the media because of the impacts to their businesses, because these businesses has been, causing our health, causing so much problems to the communities. I think those are the things that because of the persistent campaigning, especially led by women, the stories of the women who are protecting their children, the women who are, making, or the women who has who have been taking the brunt of these huge businesses without while the business are not paying any compensation or damage, because how can you sleep at night when you are profiting from a business that has been causing so much pain and miseries to the community? It's not a good PR, and that's what we have done in the past. because of our persistent campaigning against coal. But of course, at the end of the day, we were happy, but next day we have another struggle to to pursue. I think that's one of the success stories here in the Philippines about the coal activism and the coal struggle here, and we are very much proud of it because we are part of it. Thank you.
Esmeralda, perhaps I can direct this question to you that's come in that asks about education and how crucial education is. And the questioner says that I'm worried that COVID will have pushed back girls' education everywhere. So I wonder whether you could comment about the importance of education, but also, how we ought to be looking at that as a global society, particularly in the post-pandemic era.
Yes, the first numbers are coming in that many hundreds of thousands of girls will not return to school because of COVID. It also happens with the climate crisis. When there are extreme weather events, it also happens. So this is obviously something we have to fight for girls going to school. We know the impact it has on the communities. There's a saying that when you educate one girl, you educate the whole community. So that's very important. I want also to comment on the fact of a different type of politics. And I think the citizen assemblies that we have now starting to see in Europe and elsewhere are very important to change that type of participation of the people. Very important because it's all through the range of the population, women, men. It's very diverse, and I think that's a good sign. Also, another positive sign is that a few countries, all led by women, decided to propose a new system which is not based on the famous GDP, but on another sets of values of essential thing in life, like health, education, and equality. And it's women. It's Iceland, New Zealand, Finland, Scotland, and we hope that it will go to many other countries because, again, we have to say that the system doesn't work. So we have to find something else, which is not that growth that is killing us, at least in the West, because obviously in the global South, countries have still to grow, but in a different way. And definitely we cannot continue to grow like this.
And perhaps continuing on that aspect of female leadership, there's a question from Sean that says, how as women do you get over your self-doubt to trust that you have a voice that will be heard and can enforce change? Who wants to?
I can just say a word and say that, yes, we have a lot to work to do on ourselves, and to have more confidence and to learn to speak. And well, we are learning, but it's still difficult because men know so well how to dominate in debates, and everywhere they know how to interrupt women, and we have to learn to stand our ground.
I just it's an everyday challenge. I think it doesn't matter what degree you got or how many conferences you are invited or how many panels are you. It's an everyday challenge to see yourself as valuable and as a voice valued to be heard. Even in, you see that I'm talking about left wing, and even in left wing spaces in spaces of work, in workers' union, I was kind of expelled or rejected because I asked how many women does an organization have, and they were really mad. They thought that was an upfront, that it was really disgrace question to ask. How many women do your workers' organization have? It's really challenging.
If I may add, I think in my experience, the women speak up despite of their fear and the feeling of rejection, if their motivations are so strong, like it is for the sake of their children, like it is for the sake of their loved ones, they, I mean, even if they are tremble in fear, these motivations are just enough to push them and make their voices, raise their voices. um I sometimes, if it's about themselves, like protecting their own rights, sometimes they are defeated by their fear, eh. But if it is for the sake of their loved ones, especially their children, like the women that I have been with, because of the health issues that's been going on with their children and their grandchildren, they always speak up, eh, and they always stand up for the rights of their loved ones. So I think, if we could, master all the strength, and sometimes it helps when you have a colleague, a comrade, a fellow feminist that would, encourage you all the more and would give you more strength. Because as an organizer, I always believe in the fact that, um, we can master strength in by numbers, because that's the only thing we have, the numbers. We are many, but sometimes we are divided, and it's what makes us weak. And if we just learn how to, um destroy those individualism, and we can share, we can listen to each other and support each other, we can be stronger, eh. We can better our chances to defeat the enemy, if it's a society, if it's a system, or anybody. I think it's easier on women, because we always talk about each other's, we always go on a personal level, and that's what men do not have. That's why we can easily get acquainted with each other. That's why we have the hope, we are hopeful that women can lead, women can lead in changing this system. Thank you.
I think what you say there is really important, Derek, that we're more powerful if we're together. And that's how we'll start to create the change. The next question actually, in many ways feeds off what we've just said. And it says, it seems an incredible burden for women to bear the fight against patriarchy, whilst trying to juggle homemaking, bearing and raising children, education, and so on. Can it really be achieved? Is that just asking too much? And can men be encouraged to take on more of these roles? I don't know whether anyone wants to briefly comment on the role of men in this story.
Yes, luckily, I think there are more and more men who are willing to do that. And as Derek said, there are also male colleagues who are really pushing women and who are helping. We have to say that. That's a positive sign. And we have to show that the fact that we show our emotion, we show our empathy, we are not ashamed to cry when there is something tragic. I think it's also a strength. Again, during the pandemic, a few of the women leading government were successful because they were so honest and transparent about what they were doing and showed their emotion. I think it's important. We should talk much more about love, which is something that the men politicians always are shy about talking. But at the end of the day, it's love between ourselves, everybody, and love for Mother Earth that is the most important message. And I think that women can transmit that message.
It's really challenging. And although I think probably in Europe they are more involved, just for one of the indicators. When the pandemic started, and by mid-April or something, women academics were submitting 50% less articles than men. Men kind of, in the academia, men kind of went into this huge fever of submitting papers, and they were able to write and publish and everything. Women not, because they were taking care of their children. And these are women that have doctoral degrees, a lot of privilege, I know, more than in the community. So it's challenging, but I think you do it anyway, because as Derek says, that's really, you do it for your children. Because if you don't do it, you know that you are not going to have any world for your grandchildren, hopefully someday.
So the next question, I'm just going to read it out because I'm not sure that I understand the issue here, but you might. And so it's from Frankie, and the question is: do the panelists have any opinion on the tensions between academic/governmental environmental justice movements and justice and grassroots activists? So I guess I wasn't. I'm not familiar with there being a tension between that, but maybe you do. Is there a distinction between what people in the grassroots are calling for and maybe some sort of more institutionalized environmental justice movement?
This goes because of the financing, the funding that you go through to receiving funding for the WWF, World Wide Fund, or something like for climate change. So everybody's now NGOs and financing people, right, to write. And that's, I see the tensions right here, yeah, because you don't necessarily listen the voices of the people that are affected. And the funding that comes not necessarily comes to the people that are really struggling in the front lines. But there are also academics committed to the cause. As to mention one, Miguel San Sebastian, who lives in Sweden, and it's a Spanish, he made the studies of Ecuador here, of the oil extraction of Texaco Chevron company, and that helped us, the communities that are here, to portray an international trial against Texaco that we have been pursuing for more than 2 decades, and we lost in international tribunals tied to International Monetary Fund, and because the profit is always on the center. But yes, those are the tensions because of financing.
Okay, and I guess it's another example where actually this is a wider issue than just this particular area. You know, as we've been discussing in some of the comments that we've already made, the absolute central importance of local solutions that make sense in a local context to this global problem. That's the way in which we're going to be achieving that. And I think perhaps what you're saying is it's the same in terms of these environmental justice issues as well. If they're looked at a macro level, you miss the really important details of what's happening in a local context where actually the real day-to-day challenges and struggles are actually occurring. So there's another question. So we've been talking about many of the injustices around gender, obviously, but also more broadly talked about the colonial injustices, the racial injustices. There's another question that's come in here asking about intergenerational injustices and intergenerational fairness. Obviously, you know, that we've seen one of the big advances since the Paris, I think, has been the rise of youth in terms of making their voices known. But I wonder whether you have any comments about how we get those voices heard and those ideas, and how we listen more to the youth of today, who are obviously going to be the individuals who are living through the future that we are creating today.
Well, yes, it's incredibly important. The young people have shown since 2 years, being in the street, being everywhere, that they are very worried. They think the future is frightening and they want to be heard. So they manage to raise awareness, but still they are not invited or listened to in the way they should be. And there again, we have some champion like Greta, who obviously has made an incredible impact and has given input to the cause. But we forget that in all the countries in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, you have people really raising to the challenge and trying to fight for the future, but in very different conditions, very difficult because of patriarchy, because of economical situation. So we have once again to try to decolonize that movement, like we have to decolonize the conservation movement. We have excellent big NGOs, obviously, they do some wonderful work, but they are in the colonial still spirit. And it's the white savior going to the global south, where we should listen to the local communities and work much more with them. So that's exactly the same for the young people. Yes, we hear them, but they're not enough. And especially the young people from the global south.
I think that's such an important point. I mean, Erika, Derek, do you want to comment on that? You know, how wonderful though Greta has been, you know, when the previous question that we've just been discussing about a sort of global dominance versus the important local voices, how do we ensure that from your countries that those local youth voices are heard at an international level? Derek, do you want to go first?
True. Yes, that's true. In our community, our organization has a youth member. So we have this young Bataenos for environmental advocacy network. It's called Young Bin. So we also organize the young people in the community and the students to also take their stand. That's why they also organize their organization. But I think it's like also I always believe that we should always put solidarity, the strong solidarity with other members of the society, including the youth, because this struggle is not based on personalities. Although it helps if you have a personality, a local hero, but beyond the personalities or local hero, it is a collective struggle that we cannot fight this. We cannot win this fight if we just depend on a personality. We should depend on the collective strength, which is a product of a solidarity among the women, among the youth, especially the youth, because imagine they are the ones who are going to inherit this problem if they do not take part. Can they just sleep and wait for their future to be offered to them by the senior people or by adults? It is, the system has proven to be failure. It has failed them, and they should take part, because they should who knows, we do not see the problems as they see, as how they see. That's why they should make their voices counted also. That's why we always listen to the youth, and we always ask them, what do you think about this? And considering that we have a generation gap, because they are so different from us, especially the youth now. They are so different. We have already, sometimes when I talk to them, I feel very old, and I feel like I'm so very conservative, because they are so very positive. Sometimes they inspire me. Their positivity, their idealism, it gives me, it arrests sometimes it arrests my cynicism on things, because sometimes I'm hopeless. I'm feeling helpless. But when you talk about them and they're so very positive in life, they're so hopeful that they can effect change. It affects me also. That's why we need young blood. We need to involve and in solidarity with the youth. We cannot just dictate because we're the adult, because it's it's not a first come first serve basis. It's a struggle that will benefit all of us, and most especially them, because they will live longer than us. So I think that's what I can say with the youth. Thank you.
In
So, oh no, go on, Erika, please.
In intergenerational struggles, I think there should be a balance. I'm going to talk about two. The feminist movement in Latin America is changing the way things are now. It's called the Marea Verde, this huge wave of green green activism, but the green is pro-choice, for our bodies, the sovereignty of our bodies, and they are changing the way Latin America is looking now. In Argentina, in Mexico, and Ecuador, there's a lot of young women trying to change for the sovereignty of our bodies. But when you go to the local level, also in the communities, for instance, in Orellana or indigenous communities in the river, you see that most of the youth in these extraction communities, they do not want to stay in the community, obviously. They want to have higher education and go to the cities, go to Quito. So the ones that keep on defending the lands are the elder people. And if the young stay, some of them, not all, they have another vision of, so they do not think more of communal lands, but privatized, my space, my individual space land. So it has to be kind of a balance of, as I see, not changing that fast ways of life, because with the internet and the cell phones and everything, you change also the way they look at things, away from the communal keeping of territories, but also the very challenge of Latin American social movements is to give the voice to others, to be able to, for youth to participate, we should be able to take a step back. And that's a real challenge, I think, still.
Thank you. We're starting to draw to the end of our time, and I apologize. I tried to spread the questions amongst the different people who've been asking questions. So I apologize to some of the people who've put in multiple really excellent questions where I haven't been able to take all of them. Sarah asks, I mean, obviously the really important thing on the climate agenda that's coming up in the next few weeks is COP26 in Glasgow. And Sarah asks, do the panelists feel we have an opportunity to urge leaders at COP26 to increase financial support for climate action that supports gender equality, given women, as we've been discussing, are on the front line of the climate struggle? So I wonder whether each of you would like to comment on that, and more generally on what your hopes for COP26 are. Erika, please.
I don't think what we were making a video from Ecuador, from the different resistance in the south, from Yes Unidos. They are fighting to protect the water sources for their cities in Cuenca, and in the north they're fighting against mining. And I kind of hear one of the voices of my colleague, Paola Ortiz from Yes Unidos. She said, I don't think we don't even need more financing for climate change. What we need from COP26 is the governments to stop investing in extractive industries from our country. And not only oil, not only divest from oil, stop investing extractive capital and destructive enterprises in our countries. That's what we need from COP26.
Derek, what's your asks of COP26?
I think we are one with our Global South colleagues that's been calling for a more inclusive and participatory COP this year, because most of our global South colleagues were deprived of participation because of the COVID and the restrictive protocols, and because it's more expensive to participate right now. And those are the issues that we have been talking with this upcoming COP. That's why most of us are not able to participate because of that. Second, I think we should really be ambitious, and we should be really drastic on our call for the zero emissions, because we only have so little time. As scientists would have said that we have very limited time, and if we want to really address the climate impacts and address the worsening climate crisis, we have to reduce our emission. And it's also a question of justice, because in the Philippines, we are always devastated by typhoons. Only just a couple of days ago, we have been hit by another typhoon, and so many people have died again, and properties are destroyed, and many people, thousands of people have driven out from their houses. So it's not just about statistics, it's about people's lives. Human beings' lives and properties are lost. And that's why we appeal again to the COP that deliver the commitment, implement your commitment, consider the sufferings, and listen to the sacrifices of the vulnerable countries like us, because it's very unfair, because we have a little contribution. Our contribution is very insignificant, but we suffer the most, in terms of climate impacts because of typhoons. And I think the call to reduce and drastically reduce the emissions are so relevant as of today. They have to deliver. The NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, are not in the context of emergency. I think they have to review that. That's why, because they have to revisit it, because it's an emergency right now, and the NDCs are not consistent with the emergency, in the context of the emergency. Third, they have to implement, deliver their commitment on the climate finance, to be able to help the people, the countries like us, to implement adaptation and mitigation measures. It's their commitment in after all. So but yet they have not delivered, since 2015. So I think that's the what matters most for us here in this upcoming Glasgow conference. Thank you.
And Esmeralda, can I perhaps turn to you for the final thoughts on the what we ought to be hoping out of COP26?
I totally agree with Derek. This is climate justice before anything else. We have experienced during this summer in Europe, in the United States, in our rich countries, the effect of the climate crisis. The global South has been suffering that for decades. The Philippines, Bangladesh, Africa, which in Madagascar, they have the first famine induced by climate change. I mean, when are we going to wake up? Because now it's on our doorstep. I hope so, but we need this climate justice. We need the countries that are most impacted and have not been the one emitting all the carbon. We need to help those countries for adaptation, because that's been discussed since the Paris Accord, and we still don't have this green fund complete. So this is the most urgent thing, as well as to stop every fossil fuels project in the world. The scientists have told us that we have to do it. And this is now, this is urgent. I think everybody knows that there's a climate crisis, but we need to realize that it is the urgency, and that people are really dying and suffering all over the world.
Thank you. The urgency and the fact that people are really dying and suffering all over the world is, I think, absolutely critical. Climate change is not tomorrow's problem, it's today's problem. On that note, just drawing from one of the comments, questions that came in from Sarah, she was asking about what we as individuals can do. So what would your comments, thoughts, suggestions be? How would you inspire those people who are listening to this panel to actually do something themselves? What should they be doing if they wanted to really help the cause? What one or two things would you suggest that people could actually go and do today?
I've read a beautiful book by a Potawatomi biologist, she's called Robin Balkimmerer, and the book is called Braiding Sweetgrass. And the indigenous knowledge all around the world is really connected. And it's not only in Europe. I see peasants or people very tied to the land to have the same worldview. And she said, how do we start? Start planting something by yourself. Have a garden. When you see how things grow, and not only they are imported or come from wherever, or when you see water comes, you go to the ecosystem here, it's called Paramo Highlands, where the water is created. We need to recover our relationship with the land. And that has been destroyed, and it's been centuries. So the first thing we need to do, more than recycle, I know recycling is important, and the individual burden of recycling, even if some of us do the recycling, wouldn't be strengthened if we change our relationship to the land. Once we see the land is part of us and we are part of the land, we do not test it as a commodity or something that can be destroyed, because you see it's for part of your survival, not because you profit from it or you extract it or only for food, but because it's what gives us health. So that main thing, even if you have a very, very small apartment or something, growing something, caring for the land, planting something in your small space.
That's a wonderful answer, Erika. Recover our relationship with nature, actually, probably even more than land. Derek, what are your one or two things?
Yeah, I think we should start by asking or by telling ourselves that we should not accept our fate. Like we should not accept that we are just statistics, especially if we have loved ones who have been who have been lost, because of this climate crisis. We have to ask for accountability, and there is someone or some groups or some governments that is accountable because of this continuing climate change. And I think we may be living in different contexts, like in every continent, in every region, we live in different contexts, but we only have one planet, and so our responsibility is the same, to preserve and protect it. And we may not belong to the most influential who pulls the strings and dictates dictates the people in power or governments to do policies that disregard the welfare of the environment and human rights. But I believe that together as a collective, as one community, we can really transform our individual strengths into concrete power that can cut the strings and move us to anywhere we like. We are the people, and I always believe that the power resides in us. So I think we just have to do our share in this climate action. Thank you.
Esmeralda.
Yeah, I think we have to use our voice. We have a lot of power as citizens. The way we eat, the way we live will influence the companies that provide our food, and obviously the government too. If we are millions saying we don't want the system how it is, our leaders will have to change. We have to talk to our banks and say we don't want you to finance ecocide and human rights violation. And they will have to change if we are millions to say that. So our power as citizens is enormous. So let's talk, let's use our voice, let's try to convince as many people as possible, the parents of our children's friends, our neighbors, everybody. We need to be millions to say that this is not working and we want something better for our children, for the people and for the planet.
Well, thank you very much. We're out of time, unfortunately. I'd like to thank each of our panelists, Esmeralda, Erika, Derek, so much for sharing your thoughts on this incredibly important topic. I think we've heard how climate change is a justice issue, and inescapably so. And unless we tackle those deep-seated underlying injustices, we're not going to be able to tackle climate change. We've heard how important it is that everyone's voices are heard in this debate, but I think that perhaps as importantly, we've also heard how important it is for all of us to listen, because it's only by listening to everyone, including listening to everyone in communities around the world, that we're really going to be able to collaborate together and achieve solutions to not only climate change, but the broader challenges that are facing the world. And I am really grateful for our panelists to have allowed us to listen to their own stories from different parts of the world today. And I hope that this has provided an inspiring start to our Climate Change Festival. But thank you very much once again to each of the panelists. And can I also thank the people who've been involved in organising this, who have also all women. So in particular, thank you to Antoinette and Harriet and Anna, Lucia, and all the rest of the Cambridge Zero team who put really strong efforts towards this Climate Change Festival. And I hope that those people listening will join in some of the other activities we've got over the next week in terms of the festival. Thank you again.